Disclaimer: I'm not a linguistics graduate, professor, etc. If I happen to make mistakes, that is entirely on me, and feel free to tell me your opinions in the comments below. Enjoy. Hungarian is a Uralic language. It shares origins with other Ugric languages like Khanty and Mansi, Finnic languages like Finnish and Estonian, Burmic languages, and even the Sami-Yiddic languages. But for now, we'll be focusing on two sisters of the many: Hungarian, natively known as Magyar nyelv, and Udmurt, natively known as Udmurt kő. Though for simplicity and to avoid pronunciational issues, I'll be calling the latter Udmurt. The reason behind why we're focusing on these two languages specifically is simple: a single word. Hungarian kenyér, Udmurt kenyér. By listening alone, you can probably hear the similarities in pronunciation between the two words. Naturally, this compels linguists to try and figure out whether the two words have any sort of historical relation. So what are they saying? In the Hungarian Etymological Dictionary, also known as a Magyar nyelv történeti etimológiai szótára, it is written that Udmurt kenyér, meaning groats or cereals, supposedly evolved from some earlier form with an internal ng, a velar nasal, instead of an original palatal nya, which is also supported by Csúcs, who reconstructs an early proto-Permic form kenger or kengir with a similar meaning. It is theorized that this was then loaned into Pro-Hungarian, probably in the form of kenyer, and along the line semantically shifted from groats to generally any kind of grain, then to wheat, and then finally bread. The semantic shift of the word is completely reasonable in my opinion. However, I find two main issues with the loaning. Let's start with my main problem with this idea. Why was kenger loaned with a palatal nya? So Samsa Holopainen mentions this in his own work as well, saying how a lot of these possible loans between the Permic family and the Hungarians have weird sound correspondences. But what's wrong exactly? The Pro-Permic and Pro-Hungarian speakers are generally thought to have come into contact with each other during the first millennium BC, which was still relatively early into the Pro-Hungarian period, with the split from the Obo-Greek people having happened very recently. The issue with this is that at the time, Pro-Hungarian did have access to the phoneme ng in the form of the cluster nk or ng, which later did lose the ng, but by that point the word would have likely been loaned already. But considering this, wouldn't kenker or kenger be a more accurate loan than using a palatal nasal? We know that the nya was supposedly used because Pro-Hungarian speakers needed a sound to represent ng, but why would they use nya if they could have used nk to preserve the velar place of the articulation in the original word? The second issue with the loan is with the vowel in the second syllable. In modern Hungarian, it's a long a that shortens when suffixes attach. This is a common pattern in words that used to end with a vowel followed by some consonants and another short vowel, where at one point the final vowel was lost and the previous vowel lengthened. However, the word kenger already ended in a short vowel consonant sequence, meaning the compensatory lengthening wouldn't be expected to happen under normal circumstances, since there was no vowel to lose word finally. It could have been analogical, sure, but then the question is why? Hungarian words ending in a short vowel followed by r already had to have existed according to reconstructions, both with and without a so-called fleeting vowel, which is just a short vowel that disappears when conjugating the word with suffixation. This vowel likely descended directly from the final vowel of the stem without the suffix in Proto-Uralic. Examples to both of these cases are chokor and modor, respectively. This ending supposedly comes from the Proto-Uralic derivational suffix r, though the vowel at the end either had to be really weak like Pro-Hungarian word final I, or didn't exist, otherwise it would have a long vowel in the final syllable in the modern language. What I'm trying to say is it could have easily been loaned with a short vowel in the second syllable without having to lengthen. One might suggest that it lengthened in analogy to something like tenyér, but since we are uncertain about where tenyér comes from, this is hard to say. And if it assimilated to egér, which would have been between thinkiri and ingiri at that time, then in that case, wouldn't the assimilation turn kenger into something along the lines of kenkeri or kengeri? Anyways, you might be asking, what's my proposal? Well, I say the words are cognates. That's simple. I'm not saying it is the concrete or only solution, considering only two languages out of the many have these similar words, but after thoroughly researching sound changes, I propose the reconstruction of a Pro-Finno-Ugric or Pro-Uralic word that gives both Hungarian kenyér and Udmurt kenyér. Is this kenyéri, or kanyere if you want to list it like Wiktionary does with Proto-Uralic roots, but I'll be using the former of the two. Now, initially I did reconstruct it with an E or an E in the first syllable, however neither agrees with Udmurt, as the initial E does not lower to E in the development of the word, and the initial E in the latter version rounds and becomes Ü, so those two fail despite being A-okay with Hungarian. Anyways, let's trace them all the way to the modern day forms, starting at Proto-Finno-Ugric since that's the last common ancestor. Towards Proto-Ugric, the word remains stable. During the Pro-Hungarian phase, the A raises to an E sound. Throughout the Old Hungarian period, the E lowers to an E, leaving us with kenyere. Later, the rule from earlier, where the word final short vowel disappears and lengthens the previous vowel, happens, and we get kenyer. And that's it. From there on, up until today, the word remains unchanged. So, what about Udmurt? Going back to Proto-Finno-Ugric, we turn towards the Proto-Finno-Permic branch. From there, we head to Proto-Permic, where the E retracts to something like an I, though this doesn't seem to be written or bothered with in every source, and the final vowel drops, leaving us with Proto-Permic kanyir, or kanyer. A similar form to another word, actually, shakit, meaning heavy or difficult. Then we see the unstressed E back to an I-like sound, though I is also used. And the A raises to an E. The former change is shared with the previously mentioned similar word too, which develops into shakit. And we did it! We arrived at Udmurt kenyir. As for the meaning, that's also interesting. Hungarian kenyer means bread, while its Udmurt counterpart conveys the meaning of groats or cereals. So logically, some middle point of the two would probably be grain or grains, since groat is essentially just an unprecise grain type. As for bread, it's easy to see the shift from grains to wheat to food made of wheat, also known as bread, which development is similar to the one suggested by the loaning theory. Another bonus on the Hungarian side is that we see a word develop very similarly, actually, that being the previously mentioned egér. This comes from Proto-Uralic shingiri and goes through near similar phases of thinkiri, igiri, igér, egér. The two words didn't evolve identically, of course, but it does show the outcome of ér, word finally, from Proto-Uralic iri. So, that's all. This hypothetical reconstruction agrees with regular sound changes in the branches, and the semantic shift is also completely plausible. Despite all that, I want to say two things. The first being, I'm not stating that the loaning hypothesis is wrong. As of right now, there is no clear evidence that supports one theory over the other, so we can't say for certain which is right. Secondly, if you disagree or can prove I'm wrong, please feel free to do so down below. Again, by no means am I a professional, and I simply felt like trying my best at exploring a problem in historical linguistics and showing my work to others. Hopefully, future research clears up the clutter, but until then, the questions of these words' etymologies remain unanswered. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.